Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is FOX519. FOX519 does the Eye on the Economy segment every Sunday night for Radio Free Redoubt. I'm a huge Radio Free Redoubt fan and listen every week. Fox, thanks for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's our pleasure. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I do. Just kind of thinking back over this year, one of my main ones is actually focus. From time to time, preppers and patriots, we have a hard time when the news gets really quiet and we don't hear a lot, and the news stops flowing through the alternative media channels. We have a tendency to kind of go, all right, things are at a lull, but I think right now, more crucial than ever, we need to stay as focused as we possibly can on our preps and on making sure that we're keeping an eye on the economy. Sorry about the pun there, but that we're keeping an eye on things that we know are working behind the scenes, but yet aren't out there in front of us and keep reminding us, hey, prep, make sure you're putting extra food and those kind of things away. So focus is my big one for the year.
Yeah, we don't want to get sidetracked and start paying attention to Miley Cyrus and the Kardashians when we get a slow news cycle, right?
Well, and it's funny because I was doing Eye on the Economy a week or so ago, and you look at what happened with this whole Duck Dynasty business, where Phil comes out, makes his comments, the nation's in an uproar, and right as the nation's staring at the right hand, the left hand slapped us and passed the updated NDAA bill with some really nasty stuff in it. And we missed it. It was something I think that the entire country was worried about, hey, violating our First Amendment right. And we absolutely missed that. And that just, that's the kind of focus we need to maintain, is going, listen, we're not going to be distracted with what's going on and this, this mainstream story over here. That'll resolve itself. But what they're trying to do behind the scenes to us by limiting our liberties is even more important.
And remind us real quick what additions they put into the 2014 NDAA.
Right offhand, I think the biggest one to me is the sexual prosecution. So, for example, if you and your family were abducted in the middle of the night, they took you to some type of detention center, and they were to, say, violate your wife or daughter, and if that ever came to the light of day, the soldier or the interrogator, who in fact did the violation, could never be prosecuted underneath that. And that's probably one of the scarier things, because that's a tactic used by third world countries to break down to the male in the family. They have to watch their poor wife or daughter have something happen to them, and then they're like, they use that as a psyop type weapon against them. So that was one of the big provisions that I saw come out of this bill. Some of the other ones, I think the indefinite detention is still there. Some of the spying pieces have increased slightly. And then we have judges who, more recently have agreed with that's okay again, So I don't have the full list here, but to me the big one was the sexual prosecution and assault piece of it.
That's really spooky. And then we had the
That's
guy,
disturbing,
we had the guy in New Mexico recently that, he was pulled over, and the police decided that they thought he was smuggling drugs inside of his rectum, and he was subjected to multiple probes, and they never found anything. And and in my opinion, I think that's a sexual violation, and I think that he should be able to sue that police department and everybody involved in that search. And of course, they're all immune, they're all bulletproof from any type of prosecution.
Well, and he better get a lawyer before the end of the year, because the minute that rolls out, January 1st, that's the end of that. He won't be able to fight that, because they'll seek safe harbor under the NDAA. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
What do you think about getting on a budget for a New Year's resolution? There might be some folks out there that still just sort of wing it when it comes to their home finances. Do you think that's for folks that don't have a budget yet? You think that would make a good New Year's resolution?
Oh, absolutely. I know personally I maintain a budget, and I don't just maintain a budget for my finances. I actually maintain a budget for things like my firewood, my seed corn, my chicken feed, those types of things. I maintain budgets on those as well. So you have to track all aspects of your well-being there, not just your financial piece. But for folks who are still winging it on a home budget, you're just asking for financial heartache. You really, truly are. You've got to be really focused and dedicated on that, because that's where you pick up those few extra dollars here and there that you can contribute toward your preps or, your supplies or your firearm fund or those kind of things. If you don't have a budget, you're going to be lost in the wilderness. It's amazing.
Very well said. And what are some good New Year's resolutions for new preppers?
New preppers, you need to connect with people who are more seasoned preppers. One of the things when I first kind of began this journey is I instantly got on and I went to like meetup.com and some of those, and I tried to connect with local area folks, and I went to them with a list of questions as long as my arm, and I said, what about this, and where do I go for this, and how do I do it? And so now I've put myself in that position now where it's like, okay, I find those quote baby preppers and I say, okay, listen, I'm going to give you the tools, give you the things you need, help you along. And from there, I help them build their plan as well. Are they going to bug in? Are they going to bug out? What are they doing for water? What are they doing for food? What kind of foods are they storing? The almighty question of what firearm do you pick? Those kind of things. Those, you've got to find somebody you could have as your mentor. And that's hard in the prepping community because we are so worried about OPSEC that, we don't want anybody to know that I've got that 5-gallon pail of weed. I don't want to know where it is. Okay, great. You don't have to tell the baby prepper where it's stored. But you know what? Go to their home. Take a small bag of hard red weed or, winter white and show them, listen, this is the difference between the two. These are the advantages. This is why you need to do this. Here's a resource you can go get it at. You find that mentorship, and that's going to help you to also develop your network as well. So when SHTF does happen, you've got people to go to and you've got people to team up with or communicate with and say, hey, this is going on in my neighborhood. What's going on in yours? Or you have people that you can connect with to create a bigger group to be more stable. And that's really super important. A network can save your life.
Does 2014 have the potential to be the year that everything falls apart?
Yeah, it does. Which is, you just say it, it just creates a pit in your gut. But I believe it does. I think that as we're seeing the implementation of Obamacare and the subsidized amount of money that's going to be flowing out the doors, there's no way that we can afford that program. We're now at a position of almost 49.7% of Americans are receiving some type of check from the government. We don't have enough tax income coming in to even remotely offset the chance that we could ever actually pay the bills and balance the budget. I think this most recent budget passed by Patty Murray and Paul Ryan, and they're working together. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. They can say they're going to do cuts over the next 10 years, but really true, they're just going to restate it down the road. They have to stop the spending because they're not stopping the spending. Mathematically, this is going to fall apart. And 2014 has the strongest potential out of any year in the past to see that happen. We've got too many big bills that are coming due. They're going to be doing a 10-year bond swap here at the end of February, but the problem is if we don't increase the debt limit, that may cause a huge issue with that. So they're going to have to raise the debt ceiling in February, which will then in turn, really make our creditors really mad because yet again, we're increasing the limit on the credit card. They're not being paid on the bonds that they bought. I can see 2014 going sideways on us really quick, really fast.
Wow. And I was listening to Steve Leisman from CNBC. He was talking about what he expects in 2014. He said he expects global growth, the Fed to exit QE, and low interest rates. Does that sound realistic?
Well, the first problem is it's MSNBC or CNBC, excuse me.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's obviously we know the network is a huge progressive Obama supporting entity. And Steve will say whatever his copywriters and his editor tell him to say. So if they want to, spin the top and tell the world that everything's going to be okay, sure, Steve, you go ahead and say that, but you're going to have to eat your foot, your hat, and a whole lot more than that when it actually falls apart. I don't think there's any basis to that whatsoever. You can't continue a monetary printing strategy like the Fed is continuing to do. And yes, they cut it by $10 billion. Whoop-de-doo. That's still over $900 billion a year we're still pushing out the door. I mean, it's just astounding that Steve could even come out and say that and not look at the mathematical probabilities of what we're looking at. That doesn't even remotely make any sense to me.
And you just talked about the recent taper and the $10 billion a month cut. Now, prior to that, we were injecting $1 trillion into the economy annually, and that represented about 7% of GDP. The BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Thank you.
No problem.
Changed the way they figure GDP, and now they've come up with 4% growth for the third quarter of 2013. But even with their manipulated growth rate, simple math tells me that if you subtract 7% of the economy, if they completely cut QE out like they've claimed they want to, if we subtract that 7% of the GDP from the manipulated 4% growth number, we're still going to get a negative 3% GDP rate. What are your expectations for 2014 for GDP?
I absolutely think it's still going to be in the negative because even though you refigure something, I mean, it's simply just restating what we know to be a lie. I mean, you can say, well, we're going to go ahead and change this 1 to a 2, and we're going to kind of change the way we add things up. You can shuffle that deck all you want. We're still going to see the negative growth. It's not happening. If we were truly seeing a positive trend in GDP, we'd see increased job production. We'd see home sales actually increase. We'd see new business construction actually grow as well. And from my perspective as a banker, I got to tell you, we're not seeing those things. The banks that are actually in the communities in America are not lending money because the businesses are not coming in asking for money. And when those businesses don't take that money out of the system, they don't create jobs. They don't build buildings, which don't in turn create jobs that spend money at stores. It isn't happening. The super wealthy have stayed super wealthy because they've held on to their money. But the poor and the middle class are getting poorer and poorer and poorer because we don't have any money to spend or interject into the economy. So we can't buy goods or services. We can't. So that in turn is not going to drive manufacturing, which is not going to drive GDP. This whole cycle is unfortunately starting to consume itself. We've printed ourselves into a corner. Therefore, we see an increase in grocery bills. And I got to tell you from my own personal standpoint, I've got a piece of financial software, just maybe because I'm an A-type personality, I track my grocery bill. And I had excuse me, leading up to this interview, I went back and I thought, I'm going to look at what I spent this time 2 years ago on my grocery bill and what I spend now. And I buy virtually the same thing. I used to spend $140 every 2 weeks on groceries for me and my family. I now spend $240 on groceries. So you're telling me that's a 100% increase over 2 years? They can't tell me that that we're not seeing inflation. That's going to affect GDP as well. So we have families who can't even afford their groceries. How is that positively going to affect anything in the economy?
Oh, well, Ben Bernanke said in his remarks after the taper that we only had 1.6% inflation and that we needed to target it and try to get it up to 2%. So he's looking for a 20% increase in inflation. So I guess maybe at his house, there's just piles of money maybe piled up by the front door and it's creating a fire hazard and we need to raise the prices so we can spend that money down and not have so much money laying around the house to where he'd be able to get out of his front door if there were a fire.
Well, what a novel concept that when you can actually walk from your office at the top floor of the Fed to the basement where they're printing it and just gather up a couple $100 in bills and walk to the grocery store. That's great. But the rest of us have to live in the real world. And when Ben says he wants to see it at 2%, my thing is, why do you want to see inflation at all? That's not good for anybody. Inflation goes up, I stop spending. Inflation goes up, you stop spending. Our fuel bill prices go up. Our heating oil prices go up. Inflation drives all those things up. Why do you want to see that? Why do you want to see that, Ben? That's my question. If I ever had the chance to get face to face, it's like, why in the Sam hell do you want to see inflation? Inflation is not good for anybody. You want to see deflation to a certain extent, not massive deflation, but you want to see that interest rate tick to zero. Or excuse me, that inflation rate tick to zero. Because then people are able to afford goods or services again. And the economy, a free market economy, flows a little bit better.
And what about interest rates? If the Fed quits buying $500 billion in U.S. Treasuries every year, do you think the free market demand will keep the rates at current levels? Even before the taper, we saw the 10-year go from 1.6% last spring, and it's actually closed out above 3% this past week.
Sure, and we'll think through this kind of logically. Okay, so if we were at 1.6 and then we increased to 3, why are we seeing that growth in that interest rate? Well, it's because the Fed is printing gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of money. Well, the rest of the world saying, well, hey, wait a minute here. I own a bond that I bought from you 10 years ago, and you promised me 1% of my money. But you guys just keep printing money and raising your debt ceiling and keep funneling money into the government. But yet, you keep swapping out my bond and promising me a higher interest rate, promising me that. If the Fed were to completely back off this, I think we would see interest rates soar because our investors who have to invest in the United States to even have us remotely make payroll for the government employees, they'd have to offer 5, 6, 7% on a bond to even get somebody to remotely interested in being invested in the United States of America. Because it's like, if I'm going to loan money to a relative and say, okay, here, Jim Bob, here's $10. And Jim Bob says, great, I'll pay you $1 in interest and I'll pay you back in a week. Hey, that's not bad for a week's time. At the end of that week, Jim Bob comes to me and says, yeah, I really can't do that. So I tell you what, I'm going to take that $10. I need another $5, but I'll pay you $2 back in another 2 weeks. And that cycle begins to feed upon itself. Am I going to loan, Jim Bob money when he comes back to me for the 5th or 6th time? Heck no. I'm not going to loan him that any money. And neither should the rest of the world. I mean, it sounds cruel and heartless to say, but you know what? China, Japan, if you're listening, stop lending us money. It's the best possible thing that can happen to us.
And I think that China's already stopped, haven't they?
To a certain degree, I think that their bond buying days have slowed a tremendous amount because now we're seeing the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, we're seeing those guys form some incredible strategic alliances and trade relationships that are not based around the dollar anymore. And this, I don't think that because of CNBC and some of the other mainstream media, these guys are not reporting this stuff. This right here, we've got 2 legs left on the financial stool and we're standing there with the noose around our necks. And China just keeps walking around and kicking the legs out from underneath this. Oh, you thought you had a relationship with Australia? Yeah, no, you don't anymore. And they set up a trade relation in Australian dollars to the yuan. They did the same thing with the Swiss. They did the same thing all over Europe. They're setting up these relationships. China's no longer buying oil out of our Gulf. They're buying it from Russia. I mean, so they're slowly taking away all of our vehicles and trying to get the world off the reliance on the dollar because they see the way the dollar and the bond buying is going. And they know that it's got a very limited amount of time to it. And so any moment now, they're going to kick that last leg of the stool out from underneath us and pull everybody off of that and back the yuan with gold, which they've been trying to do for eons. And now they're actually making it happen. So yeah, we're in big trouble.
And what about the jobs market? Enough people have totally given up or started getting disability to drive the unemployment number down. Obamacare's caused several employers to cut hours so they don't have to provide health care for part-time employees. The available workload is being divvied up among new part-time hires, and all of these things together have brought the U3 unemployment number down to 7%. Is that a solid economic trend for 2014?
No, I think what we're looking at is that the real unemployment rate's 23%. If we really truly did the math on everybody who's on disability, everybody who is no longer even looking for work, that's dropped off the radar. I think that number is being pitched, and the Fed is using that number to gauge how much of a monetary stimulus they're doing. I think what we're going to see that number go down and down and down. And the Obama administration and the Fed and the jobs, who am I thinking of within the government is the job stuff, but
Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Labor, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Those guys are going to continue to celebrate the fact that they're having success bringing down the unemployment rate. Bring it down from what? You just have people who are underemployed, who are drawing on a government check because they've given up. They said there's no hope. There's no jobs out there. What we're seeing is a Depression era job loss come back, but they're just spinning it to the point that they just make it look great. And so everybody who's, every old person who's sitting around staring at CNBC going, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. All right, good. Jobs, that means people are employed. No, they're not employed. They're underemployed. Myself being an example like that. I lost a major high-level position in the bank. They cut it because they needed to redirect the salary to a different project. I had to go to take a position at a community bank for 40% less income. But then again, I've been required by my community bank to cut hours across the board from my branch alone. And I'm thinking, wait a minute here. These people have lives. They have jobs. So as of the first of the year, they're going to have to cut 20% of the hours just in the name of saving a few more bucks. But yeah, no, we're not going to see a decrease. We're not going to see a quote real decrease in the unemployment. We're going to see a false decrease in the unemployment rate as people drop off, as people lose work. All those things are going to contribute to that. But really, truly, we're going to see a growth in the actual real unemployment rate of around 22 to 23%.
What about the global scene for 2014? Is Europe out of the woods? Are we done with bailouts? And maybe more importantly, are we done with bail-ins?
No, we're not done with bail-ins, not by the least bit. Europe's in the same boat we are. They're just further down the river, without that paddle. Now we're seeing the ECB and some of the other European central banks, they're printing at rapid levels and they're trying to do this lending from country to country to try to keep things afloat for a while longer. But, they're in the same boat we are. They printed themselves into a corner. Now they have massive amount of, debt that these countries will never, ever be able to pay back. But what we're seeing is they're further along from us down the road because we look at a country like Greece where, that they're saying somewhere in the neighborhood of 52 to 53% of the nation was receiving some type of government subsidy. When you break that magic number of 50% of your population, it doesn't matter the size of the country. Once you start to break that and you go 51, 52, 53, 54% of the country begins to be the takers, the makers can no longer support those monies going out. So anybody who's invested within that country is going to start pulling out and saying, no, we're just not interested. And that's really where Europe's at, is that country after country after country who doesn't have any sort of sound monetary policy or didn't really think through long term, hey, can we actually afford to keep ourselves afloat? You get countries like Greece and who was the other one? Cyprus, who had the huge bail-in. You're going to see that where they're going to try to find different ways of pulling money out of the system to fund their own governmental operations or try to monetize their debt. And, Cyprus was a very clean example of how they go, okay, we take the super wealthy in our nation, we take everything above 100,000 euros and we sweep that and we put that into our operations. Yeah, but it's just like pouring water or trying to bail water out of a boat that keeps filling up from the hole in the bottom, and you're not fixing the hole in the bottom. You just keep bailing out, throwing it out the side, thinking, okay, we'll get it out of here. Oh, but the water level's staying the same. It's hard and it's cruel to say, but a reset like that where things just completely fall apart and you rebuild it from the ground up is possibly the best possible scenario. And I think we're going to see Europe go first, which then in turn is going to see us go. So if Merkel and the gang can keep it afloat over there through 2014, I would be very surprised. And I think we're going to see more bail-ins this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if bail-in talk begins here in the United States.
And how's Asia doing? I watched a show produced by 60 Minutes in Australia last year about ghost cities in China. There were about 20 brand new cities the size of Manhattan that were completely empty. Does that create the potential for economic chaos?
Well, it always does, because you got to think about where do the materials come from? Where did the labor to build those things all come from? They came from lending institutions in the Asian economy. Now, China just hasn't done those just in China. They've done those here in the States, there's a couple in Arizona, there's a couple in California where they built these, quote, economic zones. And I think, and I'm going to go down the rabbit hole just a bit here, why would China want to create those? Why would they want to all of a sudden create all these cities all over the planet that are just empty? Unless you've got some sort of expansion plan that's behind the scene. So if you think about, what China's goal has always been, China, they want to expand their empire. Where are you going to put your citizens at when they want to live, they want to work? Where are they going to move their families to? I think China's got more going. Yes, do I think it's going to cause problems in the long run? Oh, sure it does. But China's, dare I say, taking some very smart financial moves and being the number one gold buyer on the planet. I mean, they're going to back the yuan with gold. They're doing it. They're making the move to do it. Russia being number two. I mean, these guys are working together. And as much as everybody hates Putin, he's a smart guy. He's no dummy. He didn't get where he is today by just, being a vodka drinking weirdo. I mean, he absolutely is a smart guy, and he's working, with China to try to increase, their foothold on the global economy. So with, China building these ghost cities, they put these things all over the planet, not just in China. They've got to be planning for some type of long-term expansion. So they're taking a calculated financial risk, and these builders are taking these loans out, and these guys are all getting in bed and in business together. But there's something else behind the scenes we got to look at and say, why would they do that? That doesn't even logically make sense. I mean, I wouldn't just go build a city and just have it sit empty. Nobody's paying rent. Nobody's paying anything. The utilities are going to it. They've got to, if they're in cold weather areas. But what's the story there? Why would China be doing something like that?
And we right at the beginning of the show, we touched on the big budget deal that Congress just got, and it alleviated some of the sequester cuts, but it did make deep cuts in veterans' benefits. Meanwhile, federal workers who don't risk their life on the battlefield are getting a 1% pay raise. Do you think that these types of things will help to wake people up to the corruption in government and maybe get a few more folks over on our team?
Well, I absolutely do. I don't think Americans are mad enough yet to really to be taking to the streets like they should. There was a retired U.S. military colonel not too long ago who said we should be marching on D.C. over what's going on. I think that when the cuts really truly start hitting home to a lot of the veterans coming back, or to the guys who are currently veterans, I think organizations like what Stewart's put together with Oath Keepers, I truly feel like they are a sleeping giant, and our government has continued to poke them and poke them and poke them. In my opinion, you really don't want to make these guys mad. These guys are special forces operations trained guys. Doesn't matter if they're 50 years old. Doesn't matter if they're 25 years old. You start messing with their benefits and what they've done for our country, you're going to get the teeth. Well, I don't understand why they are, and maybe they're trying to push some type of martial law veteran thing, which would be just downright ridiculous because those guys would mop the floor with what's left. But I truly feel that this increase to federal workers of 1% and then cutting these guys went over, they lost body parts. They have mental injuries. Are you kidding me? Are we going to give a postal worker who can't even get a package delivered to my house on time a 1% raise? That is asinine. Absolutely asinine. Yeah, this budget deal is so far off base. I mean, Patty Murray's, she's the senator from my state. And I gotta tell you, there are two states within my state, Eastern Washington and Western Washington. And it's ridiculous. Patty Murray does not speak for anything in Eastern Washington. Nobody likes her. Paul Ryan, he's sold out. He's sold out to the Republican Party. I think that, they're as progressive as their Democratic counterparts are. This budget does nothing more than pacify a few people, get rid of the sequester spending cuts, which we needed to keep because there is so much waste in government. And next year we're really going to be fighting the same battle, and I think that we're going to see an increase in the debt ceiling, and it's not going to be good.
And speaking of the debt, U.S. debt's now over $17 trillion. It was $10 trillion when the current administration took office, and they still got a couple more years. So, they could potentially pile up as much debt in during this administration as all the other administrations before them. Does that debt level concern you?
Absolutely. I mean, the mathematical probability of even being able to remotely pay that back we can't. I mean, you could sweep all the wealth in America right now into an account to pay off that debt, and the next day by 10 a.m. you'd still be $10 billion in the hole with the spending levels we've got. And that's just crazy if you think about it, that we are spending that quickly and that rapidly to pay things off. I mean, that just is, you gotta go, how's that even remotely possible? But yeah, the Obama administration and frankly, the Bush administration before him, all those guys, they just spend, it's like giving a teenage boy the keys to a Ferrari and saying, keep it under 30 miles an hour, son. But you know what? You've got an unlimited tank of gas and a hot girlfriend next to you in the seat. Go for a ride. It's, of course these guys are going to go as fast as they possibly can, put money into worthless projects, spend money where they shouldn't be spending money, and it's going to continue to grow. Nobody's looking at these guys saying, sorry, you can't do this. You can no longer do this anymore. You've got to make some hard choices.
So Nobody wants to do it. What do you think this is going to do to the dollar in 2014?
Well, in my professional opinion, I think the dollar, we're going to continue to see a decrease. I think that loaf of bread that you just paid $1.75 for at your local Winco or wherever you have down there in Florida, I think that you're going to see that $2.75 by next year. The buying power of the dollar on the world scene is going to continue to decrease because we have, like I touched on earlier, the BRIC nations out there setting up international trade agreements with different countries trading in their own currencies. They're not going to be using the dollar any longer. So the power of the dollar internationally there's not going to be anything to support it. So every single trade transaction that takes place, we're not going to get a cut of that revenue and that income coming in. So I think here at home, we're going to see costs of goods and services that we import from other nations go up. So yeah, you like your cheap TV at Walmart there from China? Well, experience that's probably going to go up here 10 to 20% in the next year. I mean, as China kind of isolates us from the world, we're going to see an increase. Thus, we're going to see some type of inflation in goods or services. Now, if we're smart enough, and I don't believe we are, we would start really looking here at home saying, what can we do to keep everything within our borders? Fuel production, food production, energy production, everything like that. Decrease our reliance on foreign oil. That's a big one. You know, I think that the Keystone or the pipeline that was going to be coming across America needs to be relooked at again. Yeah, it's not totally environmental friendly, but you know what? The tree huggers can kiss my butt. We need those jobs. So, we've got to look at domestically pulling ourselves in, just like other areas of the country. Is that, okay, down there in Florida, what are you guys doing to make sure that your local economies are self-sufficient? You know, up here in the Redoubt, you know, what are we doing to make sure that our little economies can survive this? And I think that when you start thinking in terms of small, local, that does affect your outlook on the United States. Is that, okay, what can we do as a nation to make sure? But that's not going to happen. I mean, they don't think that way. They're trying to think as a globalized citizen, a global group, and then, you know, we think of things like this, you know, Trans-Pacific Partnership. You kind of go, you're just trying to integrate us into the global economy and pull us all into one big stage. That's not good for anybody. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, excuse me. So I think what we're going to be seeing is that the power of the dollar is going to decrease. You know, yeah. Will I still leave $1 in my kids' you know, under their pillow for their tooth fairy? Sure I will, but will they be able to go to the store and actually buy anything with it? Well, that remains to be seen.
What steps are you taking to protect your wealth against deterioration in 2014?
Well, I think that the steps I'm kind of already taking a little bit is I'm a big gold and silver guy, and I've taken some time to each time I get kind of some excess money flowing in, I go out and I buy, you know, an ounce or two of gold, or excuse me, an ounce or two of silver. I don't buy gold because I'm poor, so I buy silver, which is the next best thing. But it's because silver has an intrinsic value to it. It can be used from everything from, you know, if you need to buy a tank of fuel on it, to buying logging equipment like I did last summer. I traded a bunch of silver rounds for some equipment that I really truly needed. So I think that one right there is a big one. You've got to have a precious metal within your portfolio. And to hold that precious metal, even better. I I hear these things for Gold Line and Goldworth and all those on the national radio stations. That's great, but you don't physically hold the gold or silver in your hand. And that's really worth nothing to you. It's just, again, another piece of paper. And that's why we saw things, earlier this year, the collapse in gold and silver prices, because it was just paper. That's all that it was. But when you hold the actual physical metals like we like to do in our group, I absolutely think that's the best possible thing you can do. So I do that on there. Also, too, is you got to have your 3 Bs, your beans, your bullets, and your Band-Aids. You don't have those things, silver coins don't taste real good. And neither does gasoline you'll be trading for. So I would say make sure you've got a year's supply worth of food, I think, or more. Make sure you've got a charity share to be able to help those in your local area and your widows and your orphans. And that's what my team has done. The other thing too is that, bullets and Band-Aids. I mean, those two are pretty self-explanatory for me. You hope that you never have to fire a single shot, but those bullets are going to be there to protect what you got. And those Band-Aids are going to be there to help local people, to help your family, to help your team, recover in case of any major medical issues. So those are things I'm going to continue to focus on in the new year. I don't think, like I said at the beginning of the show, you've got to stay focused. You can't say, oh, it's quiet. I think things are going to be okay. No. Do not be deceived by that. Things are not okay. And I don't want to leave your listeners with a bad taste in their mouth, but it's the truth is that, hey guys, listen, we know that the mathematical certainty is that there is going to be an economic collapse of some type. Scary thought. But the more you're prepared for it, great. All of a sudden your job goes away. Guess what? You've got a pantry full of food that you can feed your family on. You don't have to worry about looking at your kids and saying, hey, we got to go down to the food bank or the soup kitchen and see what they've got today for us. You can be there in your home. You can shelter in place. You can be ready for those kind of things.
And what does the absolute worst case scenario look like in FOX519's mind?
A socio-economic collapse. I don't worry about pandemics because, those will take care of themselves. It's a sad thought, but it's true. When you go through a socio-economic collapse, money is probably one of the most sensitive things on everybody's mind. I mean, there are things that married couples fight about, kids, money, and sex, and money is the number one thing I see. I see it because of my line of work. I see it tear families apart. I watch people overdraw their checking account to the tune of thousands of dollars, all in the name of money and spending and keeping up. When that's no longer there, people do become visceral to a certain point. They will do anything they can, and when you have a socio-economic collapse, if you look at things like the Balkans conflict and some of the other, as countries have fallen apart, you look at that and go, they do really scary, spooky stuff to get what they need. They do horrible crimes to get what they need. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the National Geographic special earlier this year, but you watched a man kill another man with a can of peaches.
Yeah, I watched that.
And you kind of go, that particular moment stood out to me because I go, that's what we are going to see. We are going to see somebody cave somebody else's head in for a can of peaches because they're that hungry. Hunger drives people to do incredible things that you never would have possibly thought they could do. But when the money stops flowing and the money is not there, you see what we saw, I think it was down in your neighborhood, where all of a sudden the EBT cards had an unlimited amount. And all of a sudden they get shut off. And people freak out. I mean, we saw it in Michigan earlier this year where all of a sudden one day goes by and the EBT card system is down for a day. And all of a sudden that state is, people are ready to just freak out and burn everything down. So imagine when the EBT cards finally get shut off forever. What's going to happen to this nation? What's going to happen to the world? I mean, so a socioeconomic collapse to me is probably the scariest scenario, and it's probably the worst case scenario I can think of because it's the most realistic one that's going to happen to us.
And if it doesn't happen, but if you're prepared for that, it's here in Florida we get hurricanes, and
Yep.
If you've got your house and you're secured and you've got it ready to withstand a Category 5 storm, if you get hit by a Category 2 or a Category 3, you're going to be okay because you're ready for a Category 5. So get ready for the Category 5, and if it's anything less, then you'll be okay.
Well, and you look at things like Sandy Hook, where it's like that's people were defending themselves with baseball bats and bows and arrows against a roving gang of people who were just looking for food because they couldn't get the supplies.
Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah, Hurricane Sandy. Excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
FEMA can't save everybody. They can put away as many MREs and bottles of water as they want. And it's interesting. I have a contact within the government who is a buyer for those kind of things. So anytime an order comes out, I get the chance to kind of take a look at what it is. And this particular person said to me, "Oh, you got to be kidding me. There's no way we could help every single community in America if we ever had something like this." This person's also told me that, you know what, it doesn't matter in an EMP situation, which, it could happen. There's no way our government can help everyone. All they could is help themselves and their politicians' family. They don't care about you and I. Our job is to make sure that our principles are in line with what God tells us to do for our families and our communities, and to make sure that we are prudent and we see danger and avoid it.
Very good. And now, is he seeing an uptick though in the government purchasing food supplies?
Yes, food and medical. Medical has been the most recent one. This particular individual has kept me apprised of, because it's military related and it's all domestic. So they're buying thousands of scrubs and uniforms and portable tents and all sorts of things like that. I think that, some of it is probably just preparedness on the government's part, but at the same time, you kind of look at it and go, why now? Why all of a sudden is this a huge thing? Is it just a fiscal year-end thing? It could be. They may just had to spend it before the money was up in October. But I don't think it is, because about a week ago, another order has gone out for more MREs and more water. So, and they're all being kept here stateside. And MREs, as you know, don't last forever. You have to cycle them every 7 years. So why are we wasting thousands of billions of dollars on this kind of stuff if we know it's going to go to waste in 7 years? So, yeah, I would say that it's just one of those things that we really, truly, in the prepping community as patriots, we need to have our ear to the ground and stay focused, and not just let, when Alex Jones flips out about his family member getting sick on some type of H1N1 down there in Texas, let that be our worry. There's something bigger here. And because of that, we need to keep our ear to the ground all over the country.
Very, very good advice. Of course, we're going to have a link to Radio Free Redoubt in today's show notes. But for the folks that are listening on Stitcher, iTunes, and our growing YouTube audience, can you tell the folks when and where they can catch you and the Eye on the Economy segment?
Oh, sure, yeah. You can listen to us every Sunday night on Radio Free Redoubt. That's www.radiofree, and then Redoubt is spelled REDOUBT.com. And I do my segment, Eye on the Economy. Depends on what part of the show they want to put it into. But, yeah, every Sunday night, usually at 7:30 is when the show gets kicked off. Sometimes we got to push it back for production reasons to about 8. And then we also have a podcast through the Podbean site, as well as iTunes that you can subscribe to as well.
FOX519, Happy New Year, and thanks again for making time to come on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on, and stay safe, brother.
Hey, preppers and patriots. My new book, American Exit Strategy, Book 1 of the Economic Collapse Chronicles, is now available in audiobook format through Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Of course, you can still purchase the Kindle edition or paperback edition through Amazon as well. God-fearing patriots and those who believe in the Constitution will find this near-future dystopian novel to be right up their alley. Those who are looking to be more informed about the potential threat to America's financial stability will learn what to watch for and how to prepare themselves for an economic collapse. In Book 1, America is on the cusp of financial annihilation. Matt and Karen Baer face the challenges of Main Street during a full-scale financial meltdown. Government borrowing and monetary creation have reached their limits. When funds are no longer available for government programs, widespread civil unrest erupts across the country. Matt and Karen are forced to move to a more remote location, and their level of preparedness is revealed as being much less adequate than they believed prior to the crisis. American Exit Strategy uses survival fiction to take an in-depth look at the real-life politics and economics behind the issues that are likely to trigger a currency collapse or financial meltdown in the near future. American Exit Strategy is a work of fiction until it becomes history. God bless and happy prepping.